What is up, guys? Matthew here, Actual Exotic Cars, and I have not done a video for a while. I know my more popular ones are when I actually work on things. So this is a quick, I basically videoed myself. I had a leaking oil seal, if you will, for my, on my axle, I should say an axle seal that was leaking. And I had to change it out. In the meantime, I actually changed out a wheel bearing while I was at it, because it's right there, and it's kind of recommended you might as well do it while you're at it. So, recorded it, thought I'd put a little audio over, tell you what I'm doing, and here we go. So this is the rear wheel, the rear passenger wheel. Kind of odd. Obviously, first thing I like to do on these is usually, and you can see, I'm taking out the bolts for the actual axle before I lift anything while the tire's still on the ground. That way you still have gravity on it. That's just the way I do it. I find it easiest. You don't have to use an impact or anything. You don't have to worry about the wheels spinning or anything of that nature. So this is only 6 bolts on this side. The other side I have is 10. Everything I found online, all the axles are 10. I don't know necessarily why I have a 6 on that side, but everything fits, everything works. There's nothing wrong with it, so I'm not going to try to change it or standardize it for no reason. So it's pretty easy to pull it out. Like I said, it's just the bolts there. They're, I don't know, remember, it's like a 12 mil or something like that. Just pull it off. You don't need a lift or anything to actually pull the axle off. And as you can see, I lifted it up while I did that. Next step to get the actual hub out, to get to the point where you can change the wheel bearings or the axle seal if you need to, you have to take the drum off to take the entire assembly off. Obviously, to do that, you have to take the tire off. So I put everything back down. It is very nice to have a hoist. I realize not everybody has this. This job can easily be done with a jack, and the hoist is just, I got it, might as well use it. So taking the lugs off here, pretty simple, just like any other tire or wheel, I should say, you've ever worked on. So I've got to pull all those lugs off here, and then we will pull the brake off, the drum off, I should say, and that'll give us access to pulling the entire hub off. Now, a little trick, and I probably should have said this earlier, when you go to pull the axle off, I had issues the first time, and I looked it up in all the videos of the Russian guys doing it. You literally just give it a couple taps with the mallet, and that axle, once you have all of the bolts off, will literally just pop right out. Like a couple taps. I would use a rubber mallet or something. Don't dent it in with a metal hammer or anything like that. Just a couple taps, comes right out. You don't need to try to pry it out or anything like that. You might damage it, and that would not be good. So that's all you need to do. So I got all the lugs off. Now I'm about to take the wheel off right here. As you can see, wheel is off. Just a little trick, if you will. I always try to put the wheel underneath in case for some odd reason the lift drops or your jack drops. It's just a good habit to be in. It's kind of in the way anyway, so you might as well put it underneath the drum in case something happens. So try to get some good lighting for you guys. I apologize ahead of time. It wasn't as good as I wanted, but I will try to explain everything I'm doing piece by piece. So took the drum off, kind of examining the shoes right now since it's off. Everything looks good. And now getting to the point where we're about to pull the hub off. Now when you pull the hub off, there's 2 nuts there. That is, you're going to have a wrench, if you will, a socket for a hub socket. I got mine at Harbor Freight. I got a full set of them. I think it's a 55 mil, if I remember correctly, is the size. Any auto parts store, tool store, for the most part, should have them. So basically, you have a nut, and then you have a washer that's crimped around that you have to, you can kind of see me right there with the wrench and a cold chisel. You have to punch that out of there, and then there is another nut behind that. So you take those 2 nuts off, there's a washer in between them, and the entire hub will, or should, come right off. That's all there is to it. Honestly, this is really only like an hour job, if that. It's pretty simple, very easy to do. So here we go. I took it off, oil's dripping everywhere, and the reason why I have to do this, I was adjusting the brakes. I had some issues with this side, and I took the drum off, and it was just doused with oil. So in my mind, that means that the seal on the hub went bad. I don't know that for sure, but the oil had to come from somewhere. It didn't look like brake fluid. The wheel cylinder still looked good, so just process of elimination. I had a spare one anyway. Figured I might as well pop it on. And so far, so good. So I'm thinking that was it. But anyway, that's the hub. Pulled it off. Pretty simple to get at. Pretty simple to pull off. Like I said, it's just the two nuts. There's a washer that has lips on it that's kind of bent up and down to lock the nuts in case they move. So it's just got a cold chisel, like I said, but the flaps down. Anyway, so here I am on the bench here, trying to get everything pulled apart. I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I sort of forgot, if you will, the process for taking the oil seal, or the axle seal, if you will, off of the hub. And there's a new one right there. I'm not going to basically get into how I got the part. I already made a full video on how to get UAZ parts in the States, or in Western countries, if you will. But that is a seal. I'm just matching it up, making sure it's the right part before I start taking things apart. It is covered with oil, it's drenched, and whenever you take one of these apart, just the way it is, this is a very dirty job, if you will. So I'm going through all the different methods. Like I said, I've done this before, but it's been like a year or two, so I kind of forgot. It's very simple, but do not use a screwdriver like I am right now. I'm trying to pull the seal, and I'm getting to the point where I was even thinking about using a knife or cutting in half or something. Use a cold chisel. So if you're doing this yourself, it's a pretty simple job. You need to get that out to get to the wheel bearing anyway. So if you're just doing a straight wheel bearing job, I would recommend just get a cold chisel, put it underneath the seal, and give her a couple of smacks. But apparently in this moment, I completely forgot about that, and I kind of struggled here for a little while. I did make a video when I had to replace a stud on one of my front hubs on basically how to take a hub off, which is the exact same process. The reason I guess I am posting this, other than having a more detailed review, if you will, is I wanted to show you me actually like replacing the wheel bearings themselves. And you can see here I'm still don't use a screwdriver. There's a little metal ring, if you will, that is in the seal, and you'll see it whenever you buy a new one. I just pulled that out, and I'm kind of figuring, I guess, how to get this thing off. It's pretty simple. So you have the seal, and then when you get a new wheel bearing, it comes with a collar, and then behind that there's like this snap ring. So in the middle there's two snap rings, there's a wheel bearing on both sides, and then you have these two collars that are pressed in there that hold everything together. So whenever I do eventually get the seal off, you will see one of those collars. I think I tried to slow down the camera or something so you can see it. They usually come with new wheel bearings. You don't really need to replace the collars if you don't want to. It's kind of a pain in the butt. They're pressed in there. You gotta have hydraulic press. Everything needs to be perfectly straight, or if you are using a punch. I've spent many of the hours getting them in and out when I had to replace the hub on the other side. So don't really need to do that here. The hub is pretty simple, and when you look in there, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. You got the two rings, wheel bearings on both sides with the collars on each side holding them within the hub. So finally, I smarted it up. I got a punch here, and I guess it's kind of embarrassing. We'll see how long it takes me to get this out, but if you run into the same problem like I did, and like I said, it's very hard for getting information for these vehicles, unfortunately. A cold chisel is definitely the way to go. So go on the inside, give her a couple smacks, and pretty soon here we should be able to pop that seal right off. I will say the seal itself, when I took it off, didn't necessarily look too bad, which kind of concerned me. I was expecting it to be all scrapped and worn, and that was definitely not the case. So here we go. I pull it off. There's another ring, a metal ring that is behind that seal that usually comes off with it. So you can see the metal ring right there, and now I have access to take the actual wheel bearing off itself. There's two wheel bearings per each hub. You have 4 hubs. You do the math. So there's basically a total of 8 wheel bearings. So basically that's the new, I believe, no, that is the dirty ones. So off camera, I cleaned everything. I took brake cleaner. I cleaned everything with mineral spirits. I got everything down. I took a wire brush, everything down to bare metal. Didn't really record that because I didn't really see the purpose of doing so. Like I said, it was literally just me scrubbing everything out. So basically, we'll have a little time jump here, and here we go, me putting everything back in. So that's the collar I was talking to you about. You can see me taking out the package there real quick. Came in the box, the new wheel bearing, And I wasn't really going to change the wheel bearing. I didn't really have any issues with them, but one of them did have seemed to have a little bit of wear. It wasn't perfectly straight going around. So I had an extra one. I'm in here anyway. Just figured I might as well change it out. And then I guess you will see me actually installing a wheel bearing. Again, there's the collar that it sits in. There's the wheel bearing. There's one of those on both sides of that hub. So, putting everything back up. You can just use normal grease, wheel hub grease for this, or wheel bearing grease. I think disc brake also use the same grease. Nothing special. It's something I like about this van. Everything's really simple. You don't really need much special anything. Granted, getting parts is hard to come by. So liberally apply grease everywhere, including above the rings in there, collars. Obviously, you got to pack the wheel bearings, which is a very messy job. Not complicated at all, but messy job. So definitely apply your grease, because you do not want to go low on these, and wheel bearing is definitely not something I like to mess around with. So take your time, do it right. Like I said, off camera, I cleaned all this beforehand. I was just covered with oil, presumably gear oil. So please do that before you start lathering everything with grease, or else it kind of defeats the purpose, and you don't want to be doing this job immediately afterwards. So here I am packing the bearings. Pretty typical, simple, just like any other wheel bearings that you'll come with. So that's that. And hopefully, yeah, I do, like I said, the one I reused, the other one I put a new one in. Pretty simple job. There we go. And then I am just going to throw that in the hub real quick. Like I said, I'm usually very liberal with this. I'd rather have too much grease than not enough. I don't know if it's a good thing or not. It's just the way I usually do my wheel bearings. There we go. Plopping the wheel bearing in. Now remember, put the collar in. Basically pretty simple. Put everything back the way that you took it apart. We're going to put that collar in, then we're going to put that seal right in there over. Obviously, I'm going to put the new one in. Didn't really see much of a problem with the old one, but that's kind of the entire purpose of me doing this job. So there we go. Putting the ring in and putting that seal on. Everything's all greased up, lubed, good to go. Making sure the actual seal itself is clean. And we will, there we go. Okay, we have that ring in there. I would not use a hammer like I am. Your best bet's probably use a mallet. You don't want to deform anything, especially while you're in there. I think that's just something handling around, and I kind of hate having my hands greasy whenever I touch any tools. Everything gets greasy, so the less I can use, the better. Definitely would recommend using a mallet in this scenario, though. And here you go. You can see me grabbing one. And we will pound all that in there, and we will get it ready to go back into the vehicle. Obviously, try to get everything flush when you're doing this. You don't want to cockeyed or anything like that. That should be pretty self-evident, but while I'm doing it, just might as well thought I would share that with you. So, equal pressure, just like any other seal that you would do. Wipe everything off. And our hub should be all good to go and ready to install into the vehicle. Okay, so back to the vehicle here. The one wheel bearing, there's a couple of spacers that actually go up into, I don't want to say the axle tube there. Make sure you put those in the correct orientation, the way that you took them out. I tried to video it the best I could. Put those in first. Usually whenever you pull these hubs off, one of the wheel bearings like to fall out. Just take note of that. Put everything back the way you took it apart. Because there's times I have not necessarily done that, and that will backfire. So make sure you do that. Here you can talk about, those are the two nuts, if you will, that I was talking about. They're very thin, very large and thin. So there's the first one. Now there's kind of a trick to this. There is a torque spec. Usually you're supposed to torque these. As you can see, I didn't. Basically, from what I heard and what I've read, it's recommended basically to get them tight as much as you can by hand, or get them just snug by hand, and then you back it off about a quarter to a third, and then rotate the hub. So it should feel sort of like what a brake drum would feel like when you adjust those. You want maybe a slight little drag. You don't want it spinning around freely, but you also don't want it locked up, because think about it when you're driving it. If it's locked up, you might smoke through another wheel bearing, and that would not be a pleasant experience. So that's the first one. That was that washer I was talking about to you in the beginning of the video. As you can see, there's all these different ears on the sides of these. Basically, you want to pound at least one of them in to hold, or theoretically hold, that first nut in place. And then on top of that, there's another nut that's there just for security, if you will. That one doesn't necessarily need to be torqued. Again, if you're really paranoid about all this, you can find torque specs online fairly easily. And you will notice I'm kind of looking at this nut right now. One side is chamfered while the other is not. I would imagine the chamfer side, again, this probably doesn't make that much of a difference, would probably twist on towards the vehicle, while the non-chamfered side would be towards the outside, just so you can screw it on easier. Back to the cold chisel here. This is probably one of the most useful tools of this entire job. I'm pounding one of the lips in, and then once I put that other nut on there, I will pound or pry the other one out. That way, those nuts theoretically can't rotate. Obviously, when you do this job after a while, it's kind of would be nice. I would say these the washers do get pretty banged up, especially getting beaten on. Sometimes they rip, sometimes they tear. It's more of a safety measure, if anything, but I would definitely recommend having the washer in there. They just did not throw it in there for fun. So here I am tightening the nut on the outside, and like I said, this is just like a locking nut, so this doesn't have to be torqued necessarily as much. You're getting your adjustment from that first nut. The second one's just to make sure it doesn't back off. I would just snug it. I would not go super tight on it. I would not go super loose on it. Just get it snug. You can see I'm rotating it here to make sure that it rotates freely, but it's not too free. So you just want it where if you spin it around, it'll spin around a couple turns, but not like infinitely. If you spin it and it keeps on going until you stop it, and then you need to tighten that first nut a little bit more. If you spin it and it won't spin freely, then you have to loosen it a little bit more. And that's just kind of the adjustment that I try to shoot for. And I have not had any issues with that. So here you see me prying that lip, that ear up on that washer, so it holds that outer nut, which is not very difficult to do. Like I said, sometimes with these, especially when you get them used or secondhand, they're very mangled and it can be difficult. Whoever did this job prior to me, I think made everything way too loose, so the ears didn't really line up the way I wanted them to, so I kind of had to bend them and then bend them back. I'm just using some like RTV. I don't really find a point of trying to get a gasket just for the axle, because getting these parts can be a pain in the butt. Now my camera did cut off here, so basically I'm just throwing the axle back on and putting the wheel back on, and that's pretty much it. That is how you change a wheel bearing on an UAZ. It's the exact same process in the front and on the back. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.